The rain never stopped that night. It came down in endless sheets, washing blood into the trenches, hissing on twisted steel, blurring the line between the living and the dead. Private Cade stood alone among the ruins, his rifle heavy in his hands. The war was supposed to be over. The last transmission had said, "Mission complete." But the silence that followed didn't sound like peace. It sounded like something waiting. "If you can hear this," his voice cracked through the static, "I'm still here." He wasn't sure who he was talking to anymore. "Before we begin, remember this. Some echoes never fade. Subscribe for stories from the forgotten corners of human memory, where silence has a heartbeat." The sound of rain on steel. The jungle was a graveyard of machines. Blackened tanks half swallowed by mud, helmets scattered like skulls across the soaked earth, and the sharp metallic tang of gunpowder still hanging in the mist. Cade moved slowly, one foot sinking into the sludge with every step. His unit, Echo 9, had gone radio silent 12 hours ago. The last thing he'd heard from Sergeant Vale was a burst of static and a scream that cut off mid-breath. Now it was just him. Him and the rain. He tried to keep his breathing steady, but the forest had a way of listening. The trees groaned under the weight of water, their branches dripping like open veins. Somewhere far off he could swear he heard boots, not squelching like his, but marching in rhythm. He froze. "Vale?" he called softly. "That you?" The sound stopped. He waited, heart hammering in his chest, but the jungle answered only with silence. He clicked the radio. "Base, this is Private Cade, ID 2396. I've lost contact with my squad." "Requesting evac coordinates," static hissed. Then faintly, and so faint he almost missed it, a voice. "You shouldn't be here." He pulled the radio away like it had bitten him. The voice was calm, female, and unfamiliar. Definitely not command. He swallowed hard, forcing a laugh that sounded wrong in his own ears. "Yeah?" "No kidding." Lightning split the sky, revealing the burnt wreck of a transport truck nearby. Cade ducked inside, hoping for cover, but stopped short when his boot hit something solid, a helmet. His helmet, same serial number, same bloodstain. For a long moment he couldn't move. It wasn't possible, unless he had already died here once. The Shadow Company, by midnight, the fog had thickened into a living thing. It clung to him, whispering between raindrops. His flashlight beam seemed to bend inside it, twisting shadows into faces that vanished when he blinked. He kept walking. He had to. If he stopped, the quiet would eat him alive. Then he saw them, figures, moving between the trees just beyond the fog line. 3 of them at first, then 5, then 10. Uniforms, helmets, rifles. He could see the faint glimmer of tags on their chests as they passed between shafts of red lightning. Relief burst in his chest. "Echo 9, over here!" The figures stopped, slowly turned. Their faces were pale, drained of color, eyes like wet ash. They stared through him, not at him. Their mouths hung open, moving soundlessly. He stumbled back, throat dry. "Vale?" No response. Just the sound of boots on wet ground, synchronized, mechanical. They were marching. Not toward him, not away. Just marching, in perfect formation through the jungle, disappearing one by one into the mist. He followed. He didn't know why. Maybe because standing still felt worse. Maybe because some part of him believed they were leading him out. But when he reached the clearing, his breath caught. Rows of tents, hundreds, stood half-collapsed under the rain. A forgotten camp, untouched for decades. Inside one of the tents, an old field recorder blinked red. He pressed play. Echo 9 found something in the valley. Not enemy movement. Not human. "It doesn't want us here." Then static. Another click. Another voice. His own. "This is Cade. If anyone hears this, we're not alone. We never were." He stared at the recorder, his pulse thundering. He had never been here before. And yet his voice was already part of the ruin. A shadow moved behind him. Cold breath touched his ear. "Now you understand." He turned, but no one was there. Only the fog, twisting like smoke from a dying fire. The Valley of Echoes, the fog had swallowed the path behind him. There was no direction anymore. Only the faint red flicker of the flare gun in his pocket and the whisper of rain sliding down the barrel of his rifle. Cade moved carefully, every step sinking deeper into the mud. Somewhere in the distance he could still hear those phantom boots marching in rhythm. Not fast, not slow, just constant. Like a heartbeat he couldn't silence, he kept his eyes forward, telling himself this was just exhaustion. Hallucinations from dehydration, trauma, or stress. That's what they always said back at base. The mind plays tricks when it's tired, but he knew better now. The jungle was alive, yes, but not in the way biologists meant. It remembered. He reached the valley at dawn. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a wet haze that smelled of rot and gun oil. Dozens of rifles stuck out of the ground like metal gravestones. Dog tags hung from them, glinting faintly in the gray light. He knelt, brushing mud from one. It read, PVT, J. Vale, Echo 9. His throat tightened. Vale had been his sergeant, the one who'd taught him how to keep breathing when the world turned red. He heard something then. Faint music, like an old march tune playing far off in the mist. He turned. A figure sat by a shattered jeep at the edge of the valley, back turned, head bowed. The uniform was familiar. The posture, too, Vale, Cade whispered. The figure didn't move. He approached slowly. Every instinct screamed not to. Mud sucked at his boots, holding him back like hands from the earth. When he finally reached him, he stopped short. The man's head was split open, not by shrapnel, but by something smoother, surgical. Inside the skull was not bone or brain, but wires, black and wet, pulsing faintly like veins. Cade stumbled back, bile rising in his throat. Jesus Christ! The radio on Vale's vest crackled to life. Private Cade! You were never meant to return. He froze. The voice wasn't Vale's. It was the same woman's voice he'd heard through the radio before. Calm, patient, almost kind. You heard the echoes, didn't you? The boots, the whispers. That's what happens when they remember. He swallowed hard, gripping the radio mic. Who are you? Someone who tried to forget, she said softly. But memory has a sound, soldier. Once you hear it, you belong to it. Static hissed again. Then the sound of marching grew louder, this time from behind him. Cade turned and his blood went cold. Dozens of soldiers were standing at the edge of the valley, all facing him. Their uniforms dripped with rain and rot. Their eyes reflected light where there shouldn't have been any. They didn't move. Didn't speak. Just stared. He raised his rifle, though he knew it was useless. Stay back! They didn't obey. They never did. Instead, one stepped forward, slowly lifting his hand. In his palm was a metal tag, dangling from a broken chain, Cade's own name engraved on it. He stumbled back, heart pounding. No, I'm alive. I'm alive. The soldier tilted his head. Water poured from the hole in his cheek as he spoke. Voice distorted like it came from a radio buried underground. We said that too. Cade fired, once, twice, 3 times. Each shot ripped through the fog, the recoil jarring his shoulder. But the figures didn't fall. They just kept walking. His knees hit the mud. His weapon clicked empty, then everything went silent again. Too silent. Even the rain seemed to hold its breath. He looked down at his hands. They were trembling violently. He blinked, and for a split second saw something that wasn't mud covering his fingers. Ash gray and weightless. Clinging to his skin like smoke, he remembered the explosion, months ago, the one that wiped out Echo 9, the moment of white heat. The silence that followed. He had woken up after that in the same jungle. Just like now. Maybe he had never woken up at all. A faint hum began to rise in the distance, the sound of the old march again. Distorted and broken, looping endlessly like a forgotten hymn. He looked around the valley, seeing not just soldiers now, but fragments of himself, burned photos, a cracked dog tag, the charred remains of a letter he'd written but never sent. Everything he thought he'd lost was here. Everything the war had taken was waiting for him to remember, and in that moment, Private Cade understood the truth. The battlefield wasn't haunted. It was the haunting. It wasn't holding on to the dead. It was feeding on the ones who couldn't let go. He dropped to his knees, hands pressed into the wet earth, the echo of marching growing louder in his skull until it became a single endless note. The last thing he heard before the light swallowed him was that voice again. Welcome home, soldier. The loop that never ends, he woke to the sound of rain. At first, he thought it was morning, but there was no sun, only a dull gray sky, identical to every other he had seen since the war began. His body ached, but not from wounds, from memory. He sat up slowly, leaning against the burnt husk of a tree. The valley was gone. The rifles, the tags, even the corpses, all gone. Only the jungle remained, still breathing. The forest floor steamed where the rain hit it, filling the air with the smell of rust and wet leaves. Somewhere nearby, a radio crackled faintly. "Unit 9, report." "Echo 9, do you copy?" His heart lurched. That voice, command. He stumbled toward it, mud clinging to his legs, every step heavier than the last. The sound led him to a broken communications post, the same kind his unit used to set up near forward camps. The antenna was snapped in half, the panel caked in moss, but the radio light was on, blinking, waiting. He grabbed the mic. "This is Private Cade, Echo 9, I copy. I need extraction coordinates." "I repeat, static." Then a pause. "Cade?" He froze. "Yeah, who is this?" "You're not supposed to be there." His stomach twisted. "Who is this?" "You already know." The light on the radio blinked once, twice, then dimmed. He slammed his fist against the metal, shouting, "Don't you cut me off." "Not now." The jungle answered with silence, then softly. Boots again. He turned, rifle raised, scanning the fog. But these weren't the same soldiers from before. These sounded closer, realer. He could hear the weight of their steps, the wet slap of mud. Voices, faint human voices, speaking in clipped tones. "Found movement here. Might be one of ours." Relief flooded through him. "Over here!" he shouted. "It's Cade, Echo 9. The figures broke through the fog. 4 soldiers, flashlights cutting through the mist. Their gear looked newer than his, cleaner. One of them raised a hand. "Holy hell," the soldier said. "We found him." Cade blinked against the light. "You're with command?" The man nodded. "Rescue team. You've been missing for—" He stopped mid-sentence, eyes narrowing. "Wait, what's your call sign again?" "Echo 9, Private Cade." The men looked at each other. One of them muttered, "That's not possible." "What do you mean?" Cade asked. The leader's face went pale. "Echo 9 went dark 12 years ago. The rain filled the silence between them." Cade's throat went dry. "That's not true. The mission was last week." The soldier slowly lowered his weapon. "Son, Echo 9's name is carved on the memorial at base." "All of you are listed as KIA." Cade shook his head violently. "No, I'm standing right here." But even as he said it, something felt wrong, heavy. His skin was too cold. His breath came in mist even though the air wasn't that cold. His hands, the same hands that had carried his rifle through the jungle, looked pale and dusted with fine gray ash. He stared at them, trembling. No. The rescue team took a cautious step back. The leader whispered to the others, "Back away." "He's one of them." "One of what?" Cade screamed. No answer. Only the sound of boots retreating into the fog. He ran after them, but every step took him deeper into a place that felt less like forest and more like memory. The trees began to fade into outlines, the mud into reflection. His own voice echoed back at him with a delay. Not perfectly, just slightly off, like a recording played from another room. "Echo 9, Echo 9, Echo 9. He dropped to his knees, gripping his head. "Stop it, stop repeating me." But it wasn't an echo anymore. The other voice kept talking after he'd gone silent. "You can't leave, Cade. You never left. You're part of the sound now." The fog pulsed, almost breathing. The shape of the jungle rippled like a reflection on water, and then, suddenly, he was standing again at the start of the valley. The same broken rifles, the same silent sky. His radio hissed softly. "This is Private Cade, Echo 9. I've lost contact with my squad." "Requesting evac coordinates." He froze. That was his voice. From before. From hours, or years, ago. He looked around, realizing the truth he had been avoiding since the first whisper in the rain. There was no rescue. There never had been. Every message he'd sent, every voice he'd heard, every shadow he'd chased, they were all part of the same endless loop. A recording of the last moment before death. He was the echo now. The jungle sighed, as if exhaling his final breath back into the air, and somewhere, far away, another soldier's radio picked up a faint transmission. "You shouldn't be here." The woman on the radio, the first thing he felt was warmth. Not from the air or the rain, but from light. It shone through the fog, golden and soft, the way sunlight looked in his memories. Cade blinked, disoriented. The jungle was gone. He stood instead in an open field, green and wide, with birds calling somewhere beyond the horizon. The air smelled like wildflowers and gun oil. a combination that made no sense but felt familiar. He turned slowly. The tent stood behind him, canvas flapping gently in the breeze. The flag beside it was faded, edges torn. The insignia read Echo 9. He hesitated, then stepped closer. Inside, an old field radio sat on a table, humming softly. Next to it, a cup of coffee, still steaming. Someone was here. He reached for the receiver, but a hand touched his wrist. "You don't have to do that," a voice said. He looked up. A woman stood in front of him. Dark hair tied back, uniform crisp, no name tag. Her eyes were calm, but too steady, like they belonged to someone who didn't need to blink. Cade's throat tightened. "It's you." The voice, she nodded. "I told you not to stay." He stared, trying to read her face. "What are you?" She sighed, stepping past him, adjusting the radio dials like she'd done it 1,000 times. "What do you think I am?" He hesitated. "A ghost," the woman smiled faintly. "Close enough," he swallowed. "You talked to me through the radio. You led me here." "I didn't lead you," she said softly. "You followed the sound you wanted to hear." She turned one of the knobs, and the radio hissed to life. Cade froze as his own voice filled the tent again. "This is Private Cade, Echo 9. I've lost contact with my squad." The recording looped, glitching in places, his tone frayed and hollow. She watched him. "You made that transmission years ago. It's the last trace of you left in the frequency. That's what you are now, a pattern, a repetition." He shook his head, voice cracking. "No, I remember everything." "I remember being alive. Do you?" she asked. "Tell me one thing that happened after the explosion." He opened his mouth, then stopped. Images flashed, but none of them had weight. The rain, the fog, the march. No sunrises, no sleep, no hunger. Just the same endless night. His breath hitched. "Oh God." The woman nodded slowly. "You died with Echo 9. The blast buried the valley. And you've been walking through its memory ever since." He stumbled back, his pulse racing. "No, that can't be real. You're lying." "I wish I was," she said. "But I'm just like you." He looked at her, truly looked. Her uniform wasn't wet from the rain. Her boots didn't leave prints in the mud. And her face, too still, too clear. "You're part of it too," he whispered. "I was the first," she said quietly. "The prototype signal. I was supposed to monitor the battlefield, record every casualty, preserve data. But the war outlasted the machines." Her gaze darkened. "Now, the data remembers us." Cade sat down slowly, the floor creaking beneath his boots even though he wasn't sure it should. "So what happens now?" he asked. "Do I just keep walking this loop forever?" She looked out the tent flap toward the fog beginning to roll in again. "Not forever," she said. "Just until someone forgets you." He frowned. "What?" "The echoes fade when there's no one left to listen," she said softly. "Every story dies twice. Once when it's lived, and again when it's no longer told." Cade felt something twist deep inside his chest. He thought of the letter he'd never sent. The family who'd never known what happened. His squad who'd vanished into mud and static. He whispered, "Then that means soon I'll—" She nodded. "Yes, you'll fade too. That's how mercy works here." He looked down at his hands, still gray, still trembling. "Will it hurt?" She smiled faintly. "No, it'll just stop echoing." The air in the tent began to hum. The light outside dimmed. The field, the sky, even the sound of birds started to unravel like film burning in slow motion. Cade felt his body becoming weightless. Like smoke rising from the barrel of a gun, the woman's voice softened to a whisper. "When it happens, don't fight it. You've already fought enough." The last thing he saw before everything went white was her face. Calm, kind, dissolving into static. Then, for the first time in years, there was no sound at all, only peace. When the static sleeps, the silence didn't last. It never did. Cade's eyes opened to darkness again, but this time it wasn't the jungle, or the fog, or the endless rain. It was emptier than that. A vast black field stretching in every direction, without sound, without wind, without sky. He wasn't standing anymore. He was suspended, like drifting through the deep ocean, the weight of the world gone. No heartbeat, no breath. Only thought. He tried to speak, but his voice didn't echo. It simply vanished, swallowed by the dark. Then, faintly, a flicker. A spark shimmered in the void, distant, pulsing like a dying star. It came and went, and with each pulse, He heard something small, fragile, a child's laugh. He drifted toward it. Instinctively, the sound drew him through the dark until shapes began to form. Walls, furniture, sunlight through curtains. A living room. His living room, and sitting on the floor playing with a wooden tank was his son. 8 years old, the last time Cade had seen him before deployment. "Hey," Cade whispered. "Hey, bud." The boy didn't look up. He kept rolling the toy back and forth, humming softly to himself. In that moment, Cade realized the truth. This wasn't memory. It was playback, a recording of what he'd already lost. He knelt beside him anyway. "I'm sorry," he said, "for not coming home, for making you wait." The boy paused, then slowly turned his head. But when he did, his face was wrong. Blurred, unfinished. Like static, Cade froze. The child spoke in a voice layered with distortion. "You never came back. But we still listened." Cade's throat tightened. "Listened?" The boy nodded, and the sound warped. 1,000 overlapping whispers blooming behind him like a chorus. "We all listened." Figures appeared in the room. Soldiers, civilians, shadows of the fallen, faces flickering in and out of existence. Each of them radiated a faint glow, their outlines bleeding static. Cade backed away, heart pounding even though he had none. "What is this?" A figure stepped forward. The woman from the radio. Her eyes were brighter now, her form more complete. "This is the end of the echo," she said. "Every lost voice gathers here before it fades. Every unfinished transmission waits to go silent." Cade looked around. "Why show me this?" She smiled sadly. "Because you're the last one. When you let go, the frequency dies. The war ends, and finally," he shook his head. "No, it never ends. Not for us." She stepped closer. "It can. You just have to stop listening." He looked down at his hands. They were barely visible now, dissolving like mist in sunlight. The faces around him began to dim, their whispers fading to low static. Cade clenched his fists. "If I stop listening, who remembers us?" The woman's expression softened. "They do, for a while. Then they build new names, new stories. The silence isn't forgetting, it's rest." He wanted to believe her. He really did. The boy's voice came again, faint and pure through the distortion. "It's okay, Dad. You can rest now." Something inside him cracked open, the last of his resistance melting away. The noise grew louder, then softer, then nothing. He closed his eyes, and for the first time, he didn't see the battlefield. He saw a home that didn't hurt to remember, a morning that didn't end in rain. The blackness folded in on itself, and light spilled through, soft, white, infinite. He felt it touch him, fill him, dissolve him completely. Then, silence. No war, no static, no ghosts, just one final whisper barely audible, fading across the void. Echo 9. Signing off. The light swallowed everything, and the battlefield, after years of endless noise, finally slept. War doesn't end when the last bullet is fired. It ends when the echoes finally fade. For most, the battle stops when the body gives in. But for some, it keeps going, in memories, in guilt, in the things left unsaid. They march long after their hearts stop beating, carrying the sound of what they couldn't forget. Private Cade was one of them, a man who thought survival meant staying alive. But the battlefield had other rules. It remembered him. It played him back again and again, until he became part of the static. Soft sound of rain. Distant rumble of thunder. If you listen closely, maybe you can still hear it. A faint signal buried beneath the noise. A whisper carried by the wind through abandoned valleys, through rusted helmets and forgotten graves. It doesn't ask for rescue anymore. It just wants to be heard one last time. Radio crackles faintly, voice layered with static. Echo 9. Reporting in. Voice fades. Ambient wind builds softly. We tell stories like this not to mourn the dead, but to understand the silence they leave behind. Because silence has weight. It holds the things we refuse to say out loud. The truth that we only hear when everything else is gone. The war ended years ago. But the memories? They still walk. They live in the ones who survived, and in the stories that refuse to die. So if you're watching this, take a moment to listen. To the ghosts we carry, to the echoes that shaped us, to the silence that waits patiently after every scream. Music shifts. Soft piano begins underneath the static. Private Cade's signal is gone now. The frequency is quiet. The battlefield finally sleeps. But maybe, just maybe, that's what peace really sounds like. Long pause. Ambient sound fades. Voice softens. Final lines. If you felt this story, don't let it fade. Keep it alive. Share it. Let the echoes reach someone else. Because every story, like every soldier, deserves to be remembered. Even after the static stops. Every war ends twice. Once on the ground and once in the mind. Echo 9, signing off. If you believe stories should never be forgotten, subscribe and let the echoes live on.